My name is Celine. At dinner that night, 20 years after Grandma went on her big trip around the world, she put down her fork, looked straight at me and asked, "Sweetheart, why are you still living in that tiny place in Brooklyn? Whatever happened to the Manhattan studio we gave you for your 18th birthday? The one with the little balcony that looks over the Quinlan?" Before I could say anything, Mom smiled like it was the funniest thing in the world and said, "Oh, that apartment belongs to Zephyr now." Dad just stared at his plate and didn't say a word. Zephyr, my little brother, kept looking at his phone like he hadn't heard a thing. The room went completely quiet. Grandma didn't blink. She calmly wiped the corner of her mouth with her napkin and gave the tiniest, calmest smile I had ever seen. "Finish your plates," she said softly. "Then grab your coats. We're going for a drive. Open that door tonight, and you'll finally understand everything." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would jump out of my chest. For months, Mom had been sending me almost weekly messages. "Just one more transfer, Celine. Zephyr's in a tight spot." I always send the money. I thought I was still the owner of the apartment. I had no idea the real surprise was waiting just 45 minutes away, on the 20th floor of the building I used to call mine. If your family ever took something that was supposed to be yours forever, write your story in the comments. Where are you watching from? Like and subscribe so you don't miss what happened when we walked through that door. You are not ready for this one. The apartment had always been mine long before I turned 18. Grandma Isolde bought the studio on the 20th floor when I was 16. She went to the closing with her lawyer, paid cash from selling Grandpa's old warehouse in Queens, and put the deed straight in my name. She told me later it was a smart way to avoid extra estate taxes when the time came. All I knew back then was that I suddenly owned a 520-square-foot apartment in Manhattan with a balcony just big enough for 2 chairs and a perfect slice of central Quinlan in the view. My 18th birthday wasn't the day I got the apartment. It was the day I finally got the keys. Grandma threw a small party in the empty living room. White balloons floated in the air. The grocery store cake sat in the middle of the table, slightly leaning. And there was a brand new set of shiny brass keys tied with a red ribbon. She pressed the keys into my hand and said, "This is your anchor, Celine. No matter where life takes you, you'll always have a corner of this city that belongs only to you." Then she hugged me so hard my ribs creaked, and I could feel her love wrapping around me like a warm blanket. 2 weeks later, she left. She had a battered suitcase, a brand new passport full of blank pages, and a huge grin that I can still see when I close my eyes. She kissed my forehead on the front steps of my parents' house in New Jersey and promised to send postcards from every continent she would visit. The first postcard arrived from Reykjavik 3 weeks later. It had a picture of the Northern Lights with her handwriting on the back. "Having the time of my life. Hold down the fort, kiddo." I moved into the studio the same month I started working as a freelance graphic designer. The subway ride to client meetings was only 10 minutes, which felt like a dream. Sometimes I just walked across the Quinlan carrying my laptop in a backpack. I bought a second-hand desk that fit perfectly under the window. I hung string lights along the brick wall, which glowed softly at night. I filled the shelves with every design book I could afford, even the ones with torn corners. Friends stayed on the pull-out sofa when they needed a night away from dorms or bad roommates. I felt like the luckiest 18-year-old in the world. The apartment was tiny, yes. The kitchen barely fit a small fridge and a 2-burner stove. The bathroom door hit the bed if you opened it too fast. But it was mine. Paid for. No landlord. No mortgage. I kept the deed in a fireproof box under the bed like it was the most valuable treasure in the world. Grandma's postcards kept coming. One from Machu Picchu showed her wearing a funny alpaca hat. Another postcard from a night market in Bangkok had a little smear of chili sauce in the corner. She never asked about rent or bills. She knew I could handle the co-op fees with just 2 design jobs each month. Every card ended the same way. "Love you bigger than the sky. Keep the balcony light on for me." I did. I left the string lights on all the time, even when I was away for weekends. From the Quinlan below, they looked like one warm star shining on the 20th floor. I had no idea that light would later stay on for someone else far longer than it stayed on for me. Zephyr arrived in the city the same year my freelance work finally made enough money to pay for Brooklyn rent without stress. He called me from Penn Station with 1 duffel bag and a community college acceptance letter he didn't even plan to use. "Dorms are too expensive," he said, with that little brother charm he had perfected since we were kids. He wanted to crash at the studio for the first semester. I remembered him at 6 years old, following me everywhere, begging me to teach him how to draw superheroes with chalk in the driveway. I had promised Mom the day he was born that I would always watch out for him. Saying yes felt like keeping that promise. 3 months later, I reminded him to figure out campus housing. He moved in that weekend. Air mattress on the floor, Xbox hooked to my TV, protein shakes taking over the tiny fridge. I gave him a spare key and showed him how to use the tricky building laundry in the basement. He hugged me so hard my feet left the ground and swore he would keep the apartment clean. At first, it was all normal. I came over on Saturdays from Brooklyn. I stripped the sheets for Airbnb guests, restocked mini soaps, and found his stuff neatly stacked in one corner. He even left me money sometimes with a sticky note. Gas money, thanks Val. Then the note stopped. Classes went online, then stopped completely. The air mattress became a real bed delivered one afternoon while I was at a client meeting in Soho. His gaming setup grew to 3 monitors and a glowing keyboard that lit up the brick wall like a nightclub. Friends I didn't know started sleeping on the pull-out sofa on weeknights. I still came over most Sundays to get the apartment ready for guests. The doorman waved at me like always. The balcony light stayed on. Zephyr would be sprawled on the couch in sweatpants, shouting at football games on the TV, waving when I walked in. "Hey, you're the best sister ever," he said, barely looking up. I believed him. My work exploded that year. I got big branding jobs, stayed late nights in Brooklyn coffee shops, and my invoices finally hit 4 figures. Driving into Manhattan every weekend to clean started feeling like a chore, but the extra money helped me buy better software and a new drawing tablet. I told myself it was only temporary. Zephyr's friends multiplied. Empty beer cans appeared in the recycling. The fridge is filled with takeout boxes instead of groceries. One time, I found a glittery high heel under the bed while vacuuming and just laughed. College phase, right? Mom called every couple of weeks to ask how her baby boy was settling in. I said, "Fine. He's keeping the place tidy enough." She laughed and said I was such a good sister. Dad never asked questions. He just sent random Venmo payments labeled pizza money for the kids. I kept the Airbnb listings active because the money helped during slow months. Guests left 5-star reviews about the cozy vibe and the amazing view. They never mentioned the Xbox controllers or faint smell of weed that started to linger no matter how many candles I burned. Zephyr once changed the Wi-Fi password and forgot to tell me until a guest complained. Another time, the building superintendent sent a text about noise complaints at 2 a.m. I handled it all from Brooklyn, wired him extra money for utilities, and reminded myself it was only temporary. He never left. By the time I realized the 3-month agreement had quietly turned into 3 years, the apartment didn't feel like mine on weekends anymore. It felt like I was the visitor. One Saturday night, I drove over the bridge into Manhattan to get the studio ready for a week-long corporate booking. The city lights esquinlaned like tiny stars, and the familiar smell of concrete, hot pretzels, and taxi fumes filled the air. I Quinlan near the building and walked in, carrying my bag of cleaning supplies, extra sheets, and mini soaps. I pressed the elevator button and stared at the familiar numbers lighting up. 20. The doors opened slowly and I stepped inside. Everything smelled the same as it did when I first moved in, but it also felt different. Zephyr's gaming posters covered walls, I once painted white. Empty pizza boxes and soda cans peeked out from corners. I sighed and flicked the string lights on the balcony. At least that part was mine. That warm little star was still shining. And then I remembered Grandma's words. "Open that door tonight, and you'll finally understand everything." My hand trembled as I reached for the apartment door handle. What could she possibly mean? I had lived here so many weekends, so many years, and yet, tonight felt like I was about to find out a secret bigger than anything I had imagined. I let myself in with the spare key that the doorman keeps for me. I stopped right in the doorway. Something felt wrong. My winter coats were gone from the hall closet. The shelves that used to have my old art, design awards, and other special things were now full of Zephyr's sneakers. They were lined up neatly, each pair in a perfect row. I walked over and opened the drawer where I kept extra sheets and towels. It was stuffed with Zephyr's hoodies. My things were gone. Zephyr came out of the bathroom wearing just boxers and rubbing his eyes. He looked sleepy and a little confused. "Oh hey," he said casually. "Mom said it was okay to use the extra space." I opened the bedroom closet. My heart sank. It was empty. Not a single hanger had my clothes. Only his jeans, t-shirts, and jerseys were there, taking up every inch of space. "Where's my stuff?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Mom came by last month and packed it up." You never wear it anymore, Zephyr said. And I needed room for my gear. I stood there staring at the empty rod where my dresses used to hang. All my favorite clothes, the ones I had saved for years, were gone. Something cold and heavy settled in my stomach. But I swallowed the feeling. Zephyr was still my little brother. I told myself that. That same week, the texts from Mom started arriving. Zephyr had lost his part-time job. Can you spot him? $800 till next paycheck. Zephyr's car got towed. $450 to get it out, pretty please. Zephyr's phone bill was late. They're shutting it off, but just this once. Every time I asked why he couldn't pay for it himself, the answer was always the same. He had lost money on a few bets, and he promised to pay me back double when he won. I sent him the money because Mom always ended her messages with, "He's really trying, honey. Don't give up on him." I still believed I owned the apartment, so I told myself I was protecting it by keeping the lights on and the fridge full. I kept sending money. Then the co-op statement started arriving in my old Gmail, the one I had given the management years ago. The maintenance fees had jumped from $400 to almost $1,100 a month. There were extra bills for a new roof, new elevators, and new marble in the lobby. I forwarded the PDFs to Mom. She wrote back quickly, "Don't worry about those. I'll handle it with the board. You're busy with work." Deadlines at my 3 startup jobs were crushing me. It was easier to let her deal with the building drama. I told myself I would check later, but later never came. One Saturday, I went to clean the apartment again. The fridge had nothing but energy drinks and half-eaten chicken wings. My coffee maker was gone. In its place was a glowing red gambling terminal plugged into the wall. Zephyr was asleep on the couch with his phone in his hand. DraftKings showed a minus $12,000 balance. I took photos of the mess and sent them to Mom. Her reply came fast. "He's going through a rough patch. Delete those. You know how judgmental people can be." I deleted them. Winter came. I wired another $2,000 when Mom said the heat got shut off for non-payment. Spring has come. Another $1,500 because Zephyr almost got a system that works. Every transfer hurt more than the last, but I still had the apartment deed safely in my fireproof box back in Brooklyn. Paper doesn't lie, I told myself. Then one August morning, the management office called me directly. That had never happened before. They said they needed my signature on a refinancing package, or the account would go delinquent. I told them I hadn't applied for any refinance. The woman on the phone sounded confused. "But Mr. Virio submitted everything last month. We just need the co-owner to sign." My mouth went dry. There was no co-owner. I asked her to send me the documents. She promised to email them. Nothing arrived. I called Mom. She answered on the first ring, her voice too bright. "Oh, sweetie, it's nothing. Zephyr just needed a little loan against the equity. Your dad co-signed. We'll pay it off soon." "Equity? What equity?" I asked. My hands were shaking. The apartment had always been free and clear. My name had always been on the deed. I logged into the city property records for the first time in years, typing in the address with shaking fingers. Owner of record, Zephyr Corvin Virio. Effective date, 14 months earlier. My name was gone. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. My name was gone. Someone else's name was on the place I had always called my own. Then out of nowhere, Grandma walked back into our lives. That very weekend, she showed up at my parents' house in New Jersey on a Friday evening. Her silver hair was short and shiny from the sun. Her skin smelled of sunscreen, and her hug smelled of salt air, just like I remembered from my childhood. She was pulling a battered suitcase behind her. Dinner was already on the table: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and vegetables. We talked about small things, Patagonia and Vietnam, until our plates were almost clean. Then she set her fork down and looked at me with sharp eyes. "Sweetheart," she asked, "why are you still renting in Brooklyn? What happened to the studio we put in your name?" Mom laughed too quickly. "Oh, the apartment belongs to Zephyr now. We transferred everything so he'd have stability." Dad kept his eyes on his food. Zephyr smirked at his phone. Grandma didn't raise her voice. She just smiled. It was the calmest and coldest smile I had ever seen. "Finish your dinner, everyone. Then get your coats. We're taking a drive." No one argued. 45 minutes later, her rental SUV pulled up in front of my building on the Upper West Side. The doorman did a double take when he saw her, then buzzed us straight up. Grandma had the key in her hand. She must have kept a spare all these years. She turned the lock and pushed the door wide. Zephyr was sprawled on the couch in basketball shorts. 3 friends were around him, with beer cans and takeout boxes everywhere. The walls had new scratches and water stains near the ceiling. My string lights were gone. A 60-inch TV hung where my desk used to be. The room smelled like old pizza and weed. Zephyr bolted upright. "Grandma, what the hell?" She stepped inside, heels clicking on the hardwood floor, and dropped a thick folder on the coffee table. The photocopies fanned out like playing cards. Inside were the forged deed, a notarized signature that wasn't mine, and 2 pages of bank statements showing 2 refinances and a home equity line totaling $620,000. Every pair of eyes went to the papers, then to Mom and Dad standing frozen in the doorway. Grandma's voice stayed quiet, almost gentle. "Explain." Mom started stammering about helping Zephyr get on his feet with interest rates and family support. Dad muttered something about protecting the asset for the next generation. Zephyr just stared at the floor. Grandma turned to me, eyes sharp. "Did you sign any of this?" I shook my head. My throat wouldn't work. She nodded once, then looked back at my parents. "You put my granddaughter's property in his name without her consent. You let him mortgage it twice. And you, Zephyr, turned the home I gave her into a bookmaker's crash pad." Even Zephyr's friends stopped breathing. Grandma picked up her folder and tucked it under her arm. "Pack an overnight bag, Celine. You're staying with me tonight. The rest of you can stay here and think about what happens next." She walked out first. I followed, my legs shaking behind us. Mom finally found her voice. "Isolde, you're overreacting." Grandma didn't slow down. "No, Lenora. I'm just getting started." The elevator doors closed on their faces. The next morning, Grandma texted me an address for a tiny cafe 2 blocks south of the Quinlan. I walked in and spotted her at a corner table with a sharp-eyed woman in a navy blazer. Grandma pulled me into another hug, then gestured to the seat across from them. "Celine, this is my sister, Aunt Thelina." Aunt Thelina had spent 40 years handling Manhattan real estate law before retiring to Florida. I had called her the day I got the first bank letter. She shook my hand firmly and slid a thick accordion folder across the table. She opened it to a highlighted page from the New York City Acura's system. "Here's the deed transfer recorded when Zephyr turned 21. Your signature is on page 3. Look closely." She laid my old driver's license photo next to the document. The loops on the V were wrong. The tail on the Y was too long. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Forged," Aunt Thelina said. "And the notary who stamped it, Orrin Vale, golfed with your father every Sunday at Ridgewood Country Club. Conflict of interest the size of Texas." Grandma poured me coffee from the carafe while Thelina kept flipping pages. After the fake deed came 2 loans co-signed by my parents. First was a cash-out refinance for $380,000, closed 18 months ago. Second was a home equity line of credit. $240,000 was drawn in chunks over the last year. All the funds went straight into Zephyr's brokerage accounts. Bank statements showed transfers to FanDuel, DraftKings, and 3 offshore betting sites. She tapped a redline notice. Current balance owed, $622,411. The lender filed a notice of default 61 days ago. The foreclosure auction is scheduled in 59 days unless the full amount is paid. I stared at the papers until my eyes felt all blurry. The numbers and letters swam around, and I couldn't make sense of them. Grandma reached over and gently closed the folder. She didn't say anything, but her hand was warm and steady, and that made me feel a little better. I sent everything to Aunt Thelina the moment the first overdue notice arrived at my old address in Queens. I had been talking to her on the phone almost every day since I got back to New York. "We weren't guessing anything," she said. "We knew exactly what my family had done." Aunt Thelina leaned in close and spoke quietly but firmly. "The good news is, any papers that are fake don't count at all in New York. The law is very clear about that. You don't have to worry." She showed me a legal pad covered in neat handwriting. "I've already written the complaints. We can file them online Monday morning. Then, during discovery, they have to show all their bank records, every text message, every Venmo payment. They'll be buried in paper before they even get to a courtroom." Grandma held my hand tight. "I kept every original document safe in a bank in Switzerland," she said, her voice calm but strong. "The 2005 deed with only your name, the gift letter, the closing papers showing the cash purchase. Nothing they filed can beat that." I finally asked, my voice shaking a little, "How much will all this cost?" Thelina waved her hand. "Pro bono for family. I never liked Lenora's enabling anyway. Consider it my welcome home gift to my favorite niece." Grandma smiled for the first time since the night before. "We're taking your home back, Celine, and we're doing it the right way through the courts. No one can touch it again." I looked out the cafe window at joggers running around the reservoir, their breaths making little clouds in the cool air. Steam was rising from my untouched coffee. For the first time in years, the heavy worry in my chest started to feel a little lighter. I hired my own lawyer that same week. Her name was Vesper Quinlan, and she was really good at helping people with real estate fraud. She was known as a shark in court, but the nicest kind for her clients. That Monday, we filed 2 complaints in New York County Supreme Court. One was to cancel the fake deed and make me the rightful owner. The other was to sue Zephyr, my parents, and the notary for fraud. Aunt Thelina stayed as a helper lawyer, but Vesper did all the courtroom work. The harassment started immediately. Mom left 16 voicemails on the first day, crying and yelling. "You're ruining your brother's future. If you do this, we'll lose the house in New Jersey. How can you do this to your family?" Dad sent long texts saying things like, "Blood is thicker than property lines. Don't forget where you came from." Zephyr alternated between begging and threatening. "I'll pay you back everything once my system hits. Drop the lawsuit, or you'll never see us again." I stopped answering and blocked their numbers one by one. Grandma changed her phone too, just in case they tried to call her. Discovery lasted 11 long and very tough months. Vesper made them hand over every bank record, every sports betting account, and every text message. The paper trail was terrible for them. Mom sent Zephyr $30,000 the day after a refinance closed. Dad emailed the notary a copy of my old signature. Zephyr bragged to his friends about free money from Big Sis's condo. Every time I saw the documents, I felt a little sick, but I also felt stronger because I knew we had proof. We even hired a handwriting expert. He spent 3 days in court showing 27 differences between my real signature and the fake one. Every time he showed a new example, the judge shook her head at the defense table. The notary, Orrin Vale, took a plea deal to avoid jail and lost his license forever. Mom cried on the courthouse steps when the news cameras filmed her. Zephyr refused to settle. He came to every hearing in the same wrinkled hoodie, thinking family loyalty would save him. It didn't. One rainy Thursday morning, the judge hit the gavel and read the ruling. Plaintiff Celine Virio is the only rightful owner of the home. The 2019 deed that tried to give the house to Zephyr Virio is fake and void. All mortgages and debts on the fake deed are removed against the rightful owner. Lenora and Callum Virio are personally responsible for the bank. Zephyr Virio must leave the house within 30 days or be removed by the city marshal. The courtroom was silent except for Mom's muffled crying. Vesper turned to me with the smallest smile. "Congratulations. You just got your home back." Grandma squeezed my shoulder so tight I felt her rings dig in. Aunt Thelina nodded once, satisfied. Zephyr stormed out without looking at anyone. Mom tried to follow me, crying, but security escorted her out. That night, I sat alone in my Brooklyn apartment with the real deed in my lap, the one Grandma had kept safe across 3 continents. I let myself cry for the first time since this nightmare began. I had been so tense, so scared, so angry for months. Now I could finally feel some relief. I stepped into the apartment holding the key that the city marshal had given me. Zephyr had disappeared sometime before dawn on day 29, taking only a duffel bag and his gaming monitors. The apartment looked like a tornado had gone through a sports bar. Empty bottles, cigarette burns on the floor, and a cracked TV still hanging crookedly on the wall. I opened every window, letting the cool October air blow through, and started throwing black trash bags down the chute. I worked for hours, picking up broken glass, old papers, and bottles. I scrubbed the floor and wiped the counters. The apartment started to feel like a home again, even in its messy state. Contractors came the next week. They put in new floors, fresh paint, and rebuilt the kitchen just how I wanted, with quartz counters and the 2-burner stove I actually used. I hung brighter string lights and bought 2 simple teak chairs for the balcony. The deed went into a new fireproof safe inside the closet. It felt heavier somehow, but safer too. 3 weeks after Zephyr was removed, the bank foreclosed on my parents' house in New Jersey. They ignored every demand letter, refused to refinance, and watched the auction happen from the sidewalk. Mom sent one last email from a Gmail I didn't recognize saying, "We have nowhere to go." I left it on read and blocked it too. Zephyr couch surfed for months, then moved into a dark basement in Queens with 3 other guys who spent nights on the same betting apps. I heard about it from a friend once, but I didn't care anymore. I changed the subject. I changed everything else too: new phone number, new locks with codes. Only Grandma and Aunt Thelina have my new mailing address. Nothing ever goes to the old family address again. I kept designing and got bigger clients. I raised my rates without apologizing. The studio became the quiet, bright space I had dreamed of at 18. The walls were white and clean, the desks organized, and the sunlight poured through the windows in the morning. I loved it. One clear November evening, I carried a glass of wine to the balcony, sat in one of the teak chairs, and looked across the Quinlan as the skyline turned gold. The trees were bare, their branches black against the last light. The reservoir reflected the sunset like a giant mirror. For the first time in almost 20 years, the apartment felt completely mine. I thought about every dollar I had sent, every excuse I had swallowed, every boundary I refused to draw. I thought about the little girl who once promised to take care of her brother forever, and the woman who finally understood that love without limits is just another word for letting people take advantage. Unlimited kindness doesn't save anyone. It only shows them how much they can take. That's the real gift Grandma gave me. Not just the studio, but the lesson wrapped in betrayal and court fees. Your peace is not something to give away. Your property is yours. Families who treat you like an ATM will treat you like an enemy when you stop giving. I still get postcards from Grandma. She's traveling with Aunt Thelina again. They always send me new pictures and stories. Every postcard ends the same way. Love you bigger than the sky. Keep the balcony light on. I do now. It shines for me. Some nights, I sit on the balcony and just breathe. I let the city sounds wash over me, the honking of cars, the chatter of people, the distant bark of a dog. It doesn't feel scary anymore. It feels like home. I even planted a few small flowers in pots on the balcony. They're simple, but they're mine, just like the apartment. I look out over the reservoir and think about the future. I don't have to be scared of my family anymore. I don't have to give in to their lies or take blame for things I didn't do. I have boundaries now. I know how to protect myself. And for the first time, I know that I can really be happy here, in my own home, with the people I choose around me. I keep the lights on at night, like Grandma said. Sometimes it's just a soft glow. Sometimes it's brighter. But it's always mine. And it always will be.